Normandy, June 1944. 3 days after D-Day, a British tank battalion sat paralyzed in the darkness. 12 Sherman tanks, all disabled by a mysterious mechanical failure. German armor was closing in from less than a mile away. Any light would draw instant artillery fire. The battalion commander had one option: abandon the tanks and retreat on foot. Then a voice came from the darkness. "Give me 20 minutes and a lighter." What Sergeant Jack Thompson did that night violated every safety regulation in the British Army manual and saved an entire armored thrust. This is the untold story of the mechanics who worked miracles in total darkness, where one spark could mean destruction and one repair could change the course of battle. Modern warfare operates around the clock, but darkness creates unique challenges for mechanized forces. A disabled tank during daylight can be repaired with proper lighting, tools, and safety procedures. But in combat zones where any light source attracts enemy fire, nighttime maintenance becomes a deadly game of mechanical expertise versus tactical vulnerability. World War II tank mechanics faced this challenge constantly. Sherman and Cromwell tanks, the primary armored vehicles used by American and British forces, were mechanical marvels, but also maintenance-intensive machines. The M4 Sherman used a Continental R975 radial aircraft engine or a General Motors twin diesel, both requiring regular adjustment. The British Cromwell ran a Rolls-Royce Meteor V12 engine, powerful but temperamental. These tanks operated in conditions their designers never fully anticipated. North African sand infiltrated every mechanical system. Normandy mud clogged tracks and suspension components. Extreme temperatures stressed metal components beyond normal tolerances. Mechanical failures occurred constantly. A thrown track could immobilize a tank in minutes. Engine overheating could disable a vehicle mid-battle. Electrical failures could leave crews blind inside their steel boxes. And when these breakdowns happened at night, in enemy territory, under threat of immediate attack, mechanics faced an impossible choice: work in darkness and risk mistakes, or use light and risk artillery fire. Standard British Army doctrine prohibited exposed lighting within 3 miles of enemy positions. American forces followed similar protocols. The reasoning was sound. A single flashlight beam could be spotted from over a mile away, providing German artillery observers with an aiming point. One carelessly lit cigarette had been known to draw mortar fire that eliminated entire squads. So mechanics learned to work by touch. They memorized engine layouts so thoroughly that they could identify components in complete darkness. They developed techniques for diagnosing problems through sound and vibration alone. They created improvised tools that could be operated without visual confirmation. But some repairs absolutely required visual inspection. Fuel line connections needed precise alignment. Electrical wiring had to be traced to identify breaks. Suspension damage required assessment that touch alone couldn't provide. For these situations, mechanics developed dangerous improvisations. Some used hooded flashlights, standard flashlights covered with dark cloth that allowed minimal light to escape. Others created slit lights from German gas mask canisters, controlling light output through narrow openings. The most desperate simply worked beneath tank hulls, using the vehicle itself as a shield while someone held a shielded light. All these methods carried enormous risk. Even carefully controlled light could be spotted. German forces employed dedicated observation teams equipped with optics specifically designed to detect light sources. These observers coordinated with artillery batteries, enabling rapid response to any illumination. Sergeant Jack Thompson, a 26-year-old tank mechanic from Manchester, had experienced this reality firsthand in North Africa. During the Battle of Kasserine Pass, he'd watched a repair team get eliminated by German artillery after someone inadvertently exposed a flashlight for less than 10 seconds. The entire 5-man crew was lost, along with the tank they'd been trying to save. That experience taught Thompson a crucial lesson. Conventional lighting methods were suicide. If tanks needed repair at night in combat zones, he'd have to develop something radically different. His solution would be simultaneously brilliant and insane. Jack Thompson learned his craft in the worst possible school, the North African campaign. The Desert War was a mechanical struggle where armor superiority often determined victory. British and American forces relied heavily on the Sherman tank, while German forces deployed the formidable Panzer IV and the devastating Tiger I. Thompson had enlisted in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers in 1940, drawn by a childhood fascination with engines. His father had been a motorcycle mechanic in Manchester, and Jack had spent his youth dismantling and rebuilding engines in the family garage. By age 16, he could diagnose engine problems by sound alone. By 18, he'd developed an almost supernatural mechanical intuition. The Army recognized his talent immediately. After basic training, Thompson was assigned to advanced mechanical courses, where he learned tank systems in exhaustive detail. He studied the Sherman's drivetrain, memorized its electrical system, and practiced component replacement until he could perform repairs with minimal tools. Thompson deployed to North Africa with the 8th Armored Brigade. The desert environment tested equipment mercilessly. Daytime temperatures exceeded 120 degrees Fahrenheit, causing engines to overheat constantly. Sand infiltrated air filters, carburetors, and fuel systems. The fine desert dust was so pervasive that mechanics joked they could build a tank from the particles that accumulated in their clothes. Night brought different challenges. Temperatures plummeted, sometimes dropping 60 degrees from daytime highs. The thermal cycling stressed metal components, causing unexpected failures. And the absolute darkness of the desert, no ambient light from cities or street lamps, made nighttime repairs extraordinarily difficult. Thompson's first nighttime emergency came during the Second Battle of El Alamein. A Sherman tank from C Squadron threw a track just after sunset, about 400 yards from British lines. The crew radioed for recovery, but the battalion commander faced a dilemma. German positions were within artillery range. Any repair lighting would draw immediate fire. "Leave it," the commander ordered. "We'll recover it at dawn." But Thompson volunteered to attempt a repair in darkness. Track repairs normally required good lighting. The tracks weighed 75 pounds per section and had to be precisely aligned with drive sprockets. Attempting this blind seemed impossible. Thompson gathered a 3-man team and crawled to the disabled Sherman under cover of darkness. Working entirely by touch, he assessed the damage. 2 track blocks had sheared their connecting pins, causing the track to separate. He'd need to remove the damaged sections, install replacement blocks, and reconnect the track, all without seeing what he was doing.
The work took 4 hours. Thompson lay in sand, his hands bloody from sharp metal edges, feeling his way through the repair. His team held components in place while he worked, communicating through whispered instructions. German flares periodically lit the battlefield, forcing everyone to freeze motionless until darkness returned. Finally, Thompson reconnected the final track section. The Sherman's crew started the engine. It caught on the first try, and the repaired tank limped back to British lines. The battalion commander was impressed but skeptical. "You got lucky, Sergeant. That kind of blind work isn't sustainable." "Sir, with respect, it's not luck if you know the machine well enough." Over the following months, Thompson refined his techniques. He practiced disassembling and reassembling tank components blindfolded, training his hands to recognize parts through touch alone. He memorized the exact spacing of bolts, the feel of different metal alloys, the weight of specific components. But he also recognized the limits of touch-based repair. Some problems, electrical shorts, fuel leaks, structural damage, required visual inspection. For those situations, Thompson began experimenting with a tool that would make him famous: a standard Zippo cigarette lighter. The Zippo lighter was ubiquitous among Allied forces in World War II. Manufactured in Bradford, Pennsylvania, these windproof lighters were valued for their reliability and durability. Soldiers used them to light cigarettes, heat rations, and provide brief illumination when needed. Thompson saw them as precision lighting instruments. A Zippo's flame was small, typically half an inch tall, and could be controlled by adjusting the wick height. Unlike flashlights, which produced broad beams visible from great distances, a lighter's flame provided highly localized illumination. More importantly, the flame could be shielded with one's body, reducing visibility from enemy positions. Thompson began experimenting with lighter-based inspection techniques. He'd position himself beneath a disabled tank, use the tank's hull as a shield, and briefly flick the lighter to examine specific components. Each illumination lasted no more than 2 to 3 seconds, long enough to identify a problem, but short enough to minimize detection risk. The technique violated every safety regulation. Tank engines ran on gasoline or diesel fuel. Fuel vapors could ignite from open flames. Hydraulic fluid, used in tank systems, was highly flammable. One careless lighter ignition near a fuel leak could immolate both the mechanic and the tank. Thompson's commanding officer, Captain Harold Davies, discovered the technique during a maintenance inspection. "Sergeant Thompson, are you using an open flame for mechanical inspection?" "Yes, sir, under controlled circumstances." "That's insanity! You'll set the entire tank on fire." "Sir, with respect, I've performed 23 lighter-assisted repairs without incident. It works if you're careful." Davies was torn. Thompson's results were undeniable. He'd successfully repaired tanks that other mechanics had declared unfixable in field conditions. But the safety violations were egregious. "One accident, Sergeant, one fuel fire, and you'll eliminate yourself and probably take a tank crew with you. I want this technique discontinued immediately." "Sir, what's the alternative? We've lost 4 tanks in the past month because mechanics couldn't diagnose problems in darkness." "I said discontinued. That's an order." Thompson saluted and walked away. But he didn't stop using the lighter. He simply became more discreet, conducting his flame-assisted inspections when officers weren't present. His fellow mechanics knew what he was doing and said nothing. They'd seen his results and understood the necessity. The technique evolved into a precise methodology. Thompson would first conduct as much diagnosis as possible through touch and sound. Only when he'd narrowed the problem to a specific component would he use the lighter. He'd position himself to shield the flame, flick it for 2 seconds maximum, make his assessment, and extinguish it. He also developed safety protocols. Before using the lighter, he'd check for fuel leaks by smell and touch. He'd ensure adequate ventilation to prevent vapor accumulation. He'd position fire extinguishers within reach. The precautions reduced risk without eliminating it entirely. Other mechanics began quietly adopting Thompson's methods. Corporal James Wilson used the lighter technique to repair Sherman's electrical system in complete darkness, restoring the tank to operation in 40 minutes, a repair that normally required 2 hours in daylight. "It's like surgery," Wilson explained. "You don't need to see everything. You need to see the right thing at the right moment. That's what the lighter provides. Surgical illumination." By the time Allied forces prepared for the invasion of Normandy, Thompson became legendary among tank crews. When a Sherman broke down at night, crews specifically requested that mad mechanic with the lighter. His nickname, Mad Jack, reflected both admiration and concern about his dangerous methods. But Thompson's defining moment hadn't arrived yet. That would come in Normandy, when 12 disabled Shermans and 1 Zippo lighter would determine the outcome of an entire armored thrust. The Allied invasion of Normandy, Operation Overload, began June 6, 1944. Jack Thompson landed on Gold Beach with the 7th Armored Division the day after the initial assault. The Desert Rats, veterans of North African fighting, were tasked with pushing inland to capture critical road junctions and prevent German counterattacks.
The Norman countryside proved even more challenging than the desert. The bocage, ancient agricultural landscape of small fields surrounded by thick hedgerows, was perfect defensive terrain. Each field became a potential kill zone. German forces positioned anti-tank weapons in hedgerows, creating ambush points every few hundred yards. Tank losses were catastrophic. The narrow Norman lanes forced armor into predictable routes, making them easy targets for German 88mm guns and Panzerfaust infantry anti-tank weapons. The division lost dozens of tanks, some to enemy fire, others to mechanical failures caused by the brutal terrain. Thompson worked exhausting shifts, moving from disabled tank to disabled tank. The mechanical challenges were diverse: thrown tracks from rough terrain, engine damage from overloading, transmission failures from constant gear changes in tight spaces, and electrical problems caused by persistent Norman rain. 3 days after landing, the division's advance stalled. A 12-tank squadron from the 22nd Armored Brigade sat immobilized in a village called Tilly-sur-Seulles.
All 12 Shermans had suffered the same mysterious failure. Engines that started but immediately stalled under load. The timing was catastrophic. Intelligence reported German panzer reinforcements approaching from Keene, roughly 3 miles east. If those German tanks reached Tilly before the Shermans could move, they'd eliminate the British position and potentially collapse the entire sector. Brigade Commander Colonel James Harrington faced an impossible situation. The disabled Shermans blocked the main road, preventing reinforcement or retreat. Moving them required repairs, but German artillery had the area zeroed. Any visible activity drew immediate fire. "We need those tanks operational by dawn," Harrington told his engineering officer. "If they're not mobile when the German armor arrives, we lose this position and probably lose 200 men. Sir, the mechanics have been working for hours. They can't diagnose the problem in darkness, and we can't risk lighting." Thompson, who'd been working on a different disabled tank nearby, overheard the conversation via radio. "Sir, Sergeant Thompson here. Request permission to assess the squadron's tanks." "Sergeant, we've had 6 mechanics examine those Shermans. No one can identify the problem without proper lighting." "Sir, give me 20 minutes and a lighter." Silence on the radio. Then, "Say again, Sergeant?" 20 minutes and a lighter, sir. I think I know what's wrong, but I need to confirm visually." Harrington knew Thompson's reputation, both his remarkable success rate and his controversial methods. He also understood the stakes. Dawn was hours away. German armor was approaching. "You understand the risks. Any exposed flame will draw artillery fire." "Yes, sir. I'll work beneath the tanks, using them as shields. German observers won't have line of sight." "And if you're wrong, if you cause a fuel fire? Then I'll be the only casualty, sir. I work alone." Harrington considered his options. Abandoning the tanks meant retreat and probable disaster. Waiting for dawn meant facing German armor with immobile vehicles. Thompson's approach was insane, but it was also the only option that might work. "You have until dawn. If those tanks aren't mobile by then, we evacuate on foot. Understood?" "Understood, sir. I'll need one assistant, someone to hold components and hand me tools. Take whoever volunteers. And Sergeant, don't get yourself eliminated doing this." "No intention of it, sir." Thompson grabbed his tool bag and a Zippo lighter. He had less than 6 hours to diagnose and repair 12 disabled Sherman tanks in complete darkness, under threat of German artillery, using only touch and brief lighter illumination. It should have been impossible.
Thompson approached the first disabled Sherman with Corporal Peter Mason, a tank mechanic from London who'd volunteered to assist despite understanding the risks. "What are we looking for, Sarge?" Mason asked quietly. "All 12 tanks have identical symptoms. Engine starts but stalls under load. That suggests fuel delivery problem. But all 12 having the same failure simultaneously? That's systematic, not random." Thompson lay on his back and slid beneath the Sherman's hull. His hands traced the fuel lines from tank to engine. The Sherman's fuel system was relatively simple. Gravity fed from a rear-mounted tank through a mechanical pump to the carburetor. Any blockage in that system would cause stalling under load. He reached the fuel pump and explored its exterior by touch. Everything seemed intact. He moved to the fuel lines, tracing them carefully. Then his fingers detected something unusual. The fuel line felt slightly swollen near a connection point. He pressed gently. The line had unusual flexibility, as if partially collapsed internally. "Mason, hand me the lighter." "Sarge, we're right beneath the fuel tank." "I know where we are. I need 3 seconds of light. Have the fire extinguisher ready." Mason positioned himself with the extinguisher, while Thompson adjusted his position to shield the flame with his body. He flicked the Zippo. The tiny flame illuminated a 2-foot radius. What Thompson saw confirmed his suspicion. The rubber fuel line showed visible deterioration. The outer surface was cracked and discolored, but the real problem was internal. The line's interior had partially collapsed, restricting fuel flow. Thompson extinguished the lighter after 3 seconds. "Contaminated fuel," he said quietly. "The rubber fuel lines are deteriorating from the inside.
Every Sherman that refueled from the same batch has damaged fuel lines. Can we fix it? We need to replace fuel line sections on all 12 tanks. We don't have time for proper procedures. We'll cut out damaged sections and splice in new line using compression fittings. It's temporary, but it'll get these tanks mobile. Thompson quickly realized that repairing 12 tanks sequentially was impossible. He needed more mechanics, an assembly line method adapted for darkness and combat conditions. Within 30 minutes, 8 additional mechanics had gathered. Thompson briefed them quickly. We have 12 tanks with identical fuel line failures. We work in parallel, 3 teams of 3 mechanics, each team handling 4 tanks. In total darkness? One mechanic asked skeptically. I'll provide diagnostic guidance and lighter inspection when absolutely necessary, but most of this work is mechanical. Cutting, measuring, fitting. You've all done these repairs before. The only difference is you're working by touch. Thompson organized the mechanics into specialized teams. One team handled fuel line cutting and removal. Another installed replacement lines and fittings. A third team tested repairs and prepared tanks for restart. The system worked like an assembly line, adapted for battlefield conditions. As soon as one team completed their portion on a tank, they moved to the next vehicle, while the following team handled the next repair phase. Thompson moved between teams, troubleshooting problems and providing brief, lighter inspections when visual confirmation was essential. He developed a rhythm: assess by touch, illuminate only when necessary, extinguish immediately, move to the next challenge. A German flare suddenly illuminated the battlefield. Everyone froze, pressing themselves against tank hulls. The flare descended slowly on its parachute, casting harsh shadows. Thompson could see German positions, machine gun emplacements, dug-in infantry, anti-tank guns positioned to cover the road. The flare extinguished. Darkness returned. Work resumed. By midnight, 6 Shermans had received fuel line repairs. Thompson personally inspected each repair using brief lighter flame. The quality varied. Some repairs were textbook perfect, others were crude but functional, but every tank was better than it had been. The rhythm was interrupted when German artillery began ranging fire. Shells landed 200 yards away, test rounds to establish coordinates. Everyone knew what that meant. German observers had detected activity. Sustained bombardment would follow within minutes. Everyone under tanks, Thompson ordered. Stay beneath the hulls, stay quiet, stay still. The artillery barrage began in earnest. High explosive shells screamed in, detonating across the village. The Sherman's armor plating provided partial protection, but fragments ricocheted everywhere. One mechanic was struck by shrapnel, suffering a deep leg wound. Thompson crawled to him, applied a tourniquet by touch, and sent him crawling toward the aid station. The bombardment lasted 25 minutes. 25 minutes of terror, waiting for a direct hit that would penetrate a tank's armor. Shells landed within 10 yards multiple times, showering the mechanics with dirt and debris. When the artillery ceased, Thompson assessed his team. 1 mechanic wounded and evacuated, 8 remaining, shaken but functional. 6 tanks repaired, 6 still requiring work. We continue, Thompson said quietly. German armor is still approaching. These tanks need to be operational. The mechanics resumed work, hands trembling from adrenaline, ears ringing from concussive blasts, but they worked because Thompson worked, because he refused to quit despite the danger, because his calm determination steadied everyone else.
Corporal Mason, working on Sherman number 8, whispered to his partner, "Mad Jack isn't mad. He's just too stubborn to quit." Thompson was working beneath Sherman number 11 when his lighter ran out of fuel. He'd been using it for over 4 hours, far beyond its normal operational duration. The flame sputtered and died, leaving him in absolute darkness at a critical moment. He was attempting to install a compression fitting on a fuel line connection that required precise alignment. The fitting had to thread properly, or the connection would leak, rendering the repair useless. He'd planned to use the lighter for final visual confirmation, but that option had vanished. "Mason, anyone have another lighter?" The question passed down the line of mechanics. No one had brought backup lighters. Thompson's Zippo had been the primary light source for all 12 repairs. Thompson faced a choice: attempt the final fitting installation by touch alone and risk improper connection, or delay while someone retrieved another lighter, a delay that would consume most of their remaining time. He decided to trust his hands. For the next 10 minutes, Thompson worked in complete darkness, his fingers serving as his eyes. He aligned the threaded fitting by feel, testing rotation resistance to ensure proper thread engagement. He tightened the compression nut gradually, using a wrench positioned by touch, applying even pressure to prevent cross-threading. The work required absolute concentration. One mistake, stripping the threads or failing to seat the fitting properly, would cause fuel leakage and engine failure. Finally, he completed the fitting. His fingers tested the connection, checking for movement or play. Everything felt solid, but without visual confirmation, he couldn't be absolutely certain. "Start the engine," he told the Sherman's crew. The Continental radial engine coughed once, twice, then caught. It settled into a rough but stable idle. Thompson listened carefully, identifying sounds that indicated potential problems. The engine note was acceptable, not perfect, but operational. "Increase throttle slowly." The crew complied. Engine RPMs climbed, the note smoothed as the engine warmed. No stalling, no hesitation. The repair had worked. Thompson moved to Sherman number 12, the final vehicle requiring repair. Dawn would break in hours. German armor was less than 2 miles away. Tank number 12 presented a unique challenge. In addition to the fuel line damage, it had developed an electrical short. Thompson had to repair both issues simultaneously. He worked with focused intensity, his hands moving through practiced routines. Cut damaged fuel line, measure replacement, install fittings, trace electrical connections, identify short circuit location, repair insulation damage, test circuits. Finally, he completed the final fuel line connection. The electrical repair had been finished 20 minutes earlier. He called for engine start. The Sherman's engine turned over on the first try and settled into smooth operation. 12 disabled Shermans, all repaired, all operational. German panzer forces arrived shortly after dawn, 45 minutes after first light. Intelligence had been accurate, a company of Panzer IVs supported by infantry advancing along the road from Caen. The 12 repaired Shermans were positioned in hold-down defensive positions surrounding Tilly-sur-Seulles. Their presence transformed the tactical situation completely. What German commanders had expected to be an undefended village became a prepared defensive position with significant armor support. Thompson watched the battle from a partially destroyed barn behind the tank line. He'd been ordered to the rear. Colonel Harrington had insisted that the mechanic who'd saved the squadron shouldn't risk himself in the ensuing battle. But Thompson couldn't look away. Those 12 Shermans represented his work, his hands, his judgment. He needed to know if his repairs would hold under combat stress. The battle opened with a German artillery barrage designed to suppress defenders before the armor assault. Shells impacted across Tilly, destroying buildings and cratering roads. The Shermans, protected by earthen berms, weathered the bombardment. When German tanks appeared at long range, British commanders held fire, waiting for optimal engagement range. Sherman 75mm guns were effective to about 800 yards against Panzer IV armor. At proper range, the British tanks opened fire simultaneously. 12 Shermans, firing in coordinated volleys, created a wall of high explosive and armor-piercing rounds that caught the German advance in the open. 3 Panzer IVs were hit in the first volley. One caught fire immediately, the catastrophic ammunition detonation that consumed the tank in seconds. Another took a disabling hit to its drivetrain, immobilizing it in the road. The third suffered turret damage that prevented effective return fire. The German advance stalled. Panzer commanders expecting minimal resistance faced prepared positions with numerical superiority. They'd been ambushed by tanks that just hours earlier had been completely inoperable. Thompson watched as the Shermans he'd repaired maneuvered and fired with practiced efficiency. Tank number 3, his first repair from the previous night, advanced from cover, fired 3 rapid rounds, and withdrew before German return fire arrived. The fuel line repair held perfectly under the stress of combat maneuvering. Tank number 7, which had received one of the more improvised repairs, also performed flawlessly. The compression fittings Thompson had installed by touch in absolute darkness maintained integrity despite the mechanical stresses of combat operation. The battle lasted 40 minutes. German forces, unable to break through the unexpected defensive line, withdrew after losing 7 tanks. British forces held Tilly-sur-Seulles, maintaining the crucial road junction that allowed continued Allied advance inland from the beaches. After the battle, Thompson conducted post-combat inspections on all 12 Shermans. His repairs, executed in darkness using minimal lighting and improvised techniques, had survived full combat operations. Several tanks showed minor fuel leakage that would require proper repair, but nothing that compromised combat effectiveness. Captain William Sterling, the squadron commander whose tanks Thompson had saved, found in conducting the inspections, "Sergeant Thompson, every tank commander in this squadron owes you their life. If those panzers had arrived with our armor immobilized, we'd have been eliminated to the last man. Glad the repairs held, sir."
Held? They performed perfectly. I've seen factory repairs fail under less stress than what those tanks just endured. Sterling paused. I understand your repair methods were unconventional. Captain Davies wants you court-martialed for safety violations. But Colonel Harrington has refused. He's recommending you for the military medal instead. Thompson looked surprised. The military medal was a significant decoration, awarded for acts of gallantry and distinguished service. Sir, I don't need medals. Just need to know that tanks worked when they were needed. They worked because you made them work. That's worth recognizing. Word of Thompson's 12-tank repair spread rapidly through British armored formations in Normandy. Within a week, mechanics from multiple battalions were requesting information about his methods. The lighter technique became simultaneously legendary and controversial. REME headquarters established a formal investigation into Thompson's repair procedures. The inquiry focused on safety violations, specifically the use of open flame near fuel systems. A board of senior engineering officers reviewed his methods, interviewed witnesses, and assessed the risks involved. Captain Davies testified extensively about the dangers. Sergeant Thompson's methods violate fundamental safety protocols established to prevent catastrophic fires. That his improvised techniques have thus far avoided disaster does not make them acceptable. But combat commanders offered contrary perspectives. Colonel Harrington's testimony was particularly influential. Gentlemen, we're prosecuting a war. Every tactical decision involves risk assessment, balancing potential gains against potential losses. Thompson's techniques carry safety risks, certainly, but the alternative, immobilized armor in combat zones, carries far greater tactical risk. His methods saved 12 tanks and preserved an entire defensive position. That's not reckless endangerment, that's battlefield innovation. The investigation concluded with mixed findings. Thompson's techniques were officially deemed not recommended for general implementation due to safety concerns. However, the report also acknowledged that under extraordinary circumstances where standard procedures are impractical, experienced mechanics may employ unconventional methods at their discretion, provided appropriate safety measures are observed. It was bureaucratic language that essentially said, we don't officially approve, but we won't stop you. Thompson himself was neither court-martialed nor decorated. The military medal recommendation was quietly withdrawn, a political compromise that satisfied both critics and supporters. He remained a sergeant, continued his repair duties, and trained other mechanics in darkness-based diagnostic techniques. But his influence extended beyond official recognition. Mechanics across multiple divisions began developing their own variations of the lighter technique. Some used shielded candles. Others created improvised LED lights powered by tank batteries. Corporal James Wilson, who'd learned directly from Thompson in North Africa, developed a double shield method that used both the tank's hull and a mechanic's body to block light from enemy observation. His technique allowed slightly longer illumination periods with reduced detection risk. By August, as Allied forces broke out from Normandy and advanced across France, nighttime tank repair had evolved from desperate improvisation into recognized tactical capability. Maintenance units could recover and repair disabled armor during darkness, maintaining operational readiness that would have been impossible using strictly daylight procedures. The Germans, aware that Allied tanks were being repaired at night despite blackout conditions, increased their use of flares and observation patrols. But the brief, shielded lighting techniques proved difficult to detect. German after-action reports from late 1944 expressed frustration about Allied armor that appears disabled but returns to operation overnight through unknown methods. Thompson's final wartime innovation came during operations in the Netherlands. He developed a technique for diagnosing tank engine problems through vibration analysis, placing hands on specific engine components and identifying malfunctions through the pattern of vibrations. This touch diagnosis method eliminated the need for even minimal lighting for certain categories of repairs. He trained a generation of mechanics who understood that expertise wasn't just about technical knowledge, it was about adapting that knowledge to impossible circumstances, about trusting your hands when your eyes failed you, about refusing to accept impossible as an answer when lives depended on finding solutions. By war's end, Thompson had personally repaired or supervised repairs on over 200 disabled tanks. He'd never caused a fuel fire despite thousands of uses of his lighter technique. Jack Thompson survived the war and returned to Manchester in May 1945. He resumed civilian life working as a mechanic, opening a small motorcycle repair shop that operated for 35 years. He rarely spoke about his wartime service, deflecting questions with characteristic modesty. "I just fix tanks. Nothing special about that." But in military maintenance communities, Thompson's name carried weight. Post-war British Army maintenance doctrine incorporated several principles derived from Thompson's techniques. Training programs taught mechanics to work by touch, memorizing component layouts well enough to perform basic repairs without lighting. The fundamental concept that exceptional circumstances justify exceptional methods became embedded in field maintenance philosophy. The lighter technique itself was eventually superseded by better technology. Post-war development of filtered flashlights, low-signature LED lights, and night vision equipment eliminated the need for open flame illumination. But Thompson's underlying principle remained relevant. Mechanics needed multiple diagnostic methods, including touch-based assessment that didn't depend on visual confirmation. During the Falklands War in 1982, British mechanics faced similar challenges repairing armored vehicles during blackout conditions in the South Atlantic. A Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers sergeant named David Morrison, who'd studied Thompson's wartime methods, used adapted versions of the touch diagnosis and minimal lighting techniques to repair a disabled Scorpion light tank during a night evacuation. Morrison later credited Thompson's example with inspiring his approach. Thompson's story reached wider audiences through military history publications in the 1990s. Historian James Holland documented the 12-tank repair at Tilly-sur-Seine, describing it as one of the most remarkable maintenance achievements of the war. A combination of technical expertise, physical courage, and stubborn determination that exemplified the often overlooked contributions of support personnel. Modern military maintenance doctrine recognizes the principle that Thompson demonstrated, that technical expertise must include adaptability. The U.S. Army's maintenance manual includes a section on expedient field repairs that explicitly acknowledges situations where standard procedures may be impractical and experienced technicians must innovate. Thompson passed away in 1996 at age 78. His obituary in the Manchester Guardian mentioned his wartime service briefly, noting that he'd been a tank mechanic with the 7th Armoured Division. But at his funeral, 11 men in their 70s, tank commanders and crew members who'd served in those 12 Shermans in June 1944, they'd tracked down Thompson's family to pay their respects to the mechanic who had saved their lives over 50 years earlier. "Your father was the bravest man I ever met," one veteran told Thompson's son. "He worked beneath our tank while German artillery was landing all around us. He didn't have to do that. He could have left us. But he stayed, and we lived because he stayed." Thompson's original Zippo lighter, the tool he'd used for hundreds of repairs, was donated to the Tank Museum at Bovington, England. It sits in a display case alongside other artifacts from the Normandy campaign. The display placard at the Tank Museum reads, "Zippo lighter used by Sergeant Jack Thompson, REME, for field repairs under combat conditions." This lighter provided illumination for the repair of 12 disabled Sherman tanks at Tilly-sur-Seulles, June 1944, enabling British forces to hold a critical defensive position. Thompson's innovative maintenance techniques demonstrated that technical expertise, combined with courage and adaptability, could overcome seemingly impossible challenges. Modern tank mechanics visiting the museum sometimes pause at that display, studying the battered Zippo lighter, imagining working in total darkness beneath a disabled tank, using that tiny flame to diagnose problems while enemy artillery ranged in around them. The lighter represents a simple truth about war, that victory often depends not on sophisticated weapons or brilliant strategies, but on skilled individuals who refuse to quit, who adapt their expertise to impossible circumstances, and who understand that sometimes the right tool for the job is whatever you have in your pocket. Thompson's methods have influenced military maintenance training programs worldwide. Modern military mechanics are trained not just to follow procedures, but to think creatively when circumstances prevent standard approaches. In Iraq and Afghanistan, American mechanics faced similar challenges repairing vehicles in hostile environments where lighting restrictions were necessary for security. Many developed their own variations of Thompson's techniques, using shielded lights and touch-based diagnosis to conduct repairs during hours of darkness. The principle Thompson demonstrated that sometimes you must violate peacetime safety standards to accomplish wartime missions remains relevant in modern combat operations. Military doctrine now explicitly recognizes that field conditions may require deviation from standard procedures, provided the deviation is justified by tactical necessity and executed by skilled personnel. Thompson's story also highlights the often overlooked contributions of support personnel. Tank crews who fought on Hacksaw Ridge or charged across open fields receive recognition for their courage, but the mechanics who kept those tanks running, often under equally dangerous conditions, rarely appear in history books. Yet without mechanics like Thompson, armored warfare would have been impossible. Every tank that rolled into battle represented countless hours of maintenance, repair, and improvisation by skilled technicians who understood their machines intimately. Thompson never called himself a hero. He was just a mechanic who did his job under difficult conditions. But the men whose lives he saved knew better. They knew that his Zippo lighter and the skilled hands that wielded it had changed the outcome of battle. The 12 Shermans Thompson repaired that night in Tilly-sur-Seulles went on to participate in the drive across France, the liberation of Belgium, and the final push into Germany. Several survived the entire war. Their crews never forgot the sergeant who'd worked through the night in complete darkness to give them a fighting chance. That lighter, now displayed under glass, served as more than an improvised lighting tool. It represented innovation born of necessity, courage in the face of danger, and the determination to find solutions when conventional wisdom said none existed. Thompson's proved that one person with expertise, courage, and determination could make a genuine difference even in humanity's darkest moments. His legacy lives on in every mechanic who refuses to accept impossible as an answer, who trusts their hands when their eyes fail them, and who understands that sometimes the greatest victories are won not with weapons, but with wrenches.